going live on the YouTubes. All right. Welcome, everybody. Ken, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. What's up, bud?
What's up? Well, let's let people join for a second, and then we will start and officially to a minute or so. But let's let people join. Let's tweet out the link if you haven't done so already.
I'm over here running the Ken Wheeler Child University. They're under the finest tutelage. Say hi. Yeah, it's safe. It's good.
Okay, looks like people are joining. And let's get this show on the road. So, welcome to the Undefined podcast. I'm Jared Palmer.
And I'm Ken Wheeler. And today we have a special guest. It's Bekah Weigel. Did I pronounce that properly?
Yeah, it's Hawrot Weigel. So I've got two last names. It's kind of tricky.
Hawrot.
There you go.
Hawrot Weigel.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on?
Not too much. I am just taking a break from writing some tests.
Nice.
What kind of tests are you writing?
I'm working on a React project, so I'm using testing library to make sure we got everything going okay.
Testing library.
Always a good time.
Always a great time. So thanks so much for joining today. As people are sort of trickling in here, we wanted to, Ken, actually, I'll let you introduce Bekah because you sort of made the connection on, I think it was Instagram.
Yeah, I saw you on the gram. You're talking about a podcast, and I was like, you should come on the Undefined.
It's awesome. Thanks for having me.
Here we are today. Oh, nice job. I'm teaching some child arithmetic over here right now. Good job. Do the bottom one. You want to tell the folks at home a little about yourself?
Sure. So I am a career changer. Prior to being a developer, I taught in a college English department for about 10 years part-time as an adjunct. And then I went to Flatiron School and graduated last May, and I've been working since July.
That's awesome. How was the boot camp experience? I have a lot of friends who are like not developers, but they're interested in becoming developers, and I've always wondered what that was like because I've just been doing this since Flash, so I haven't had much exposure.
Yeah, I really love the experience. I think that it was really perfect for me and really great. Like there was a great community at Flatiron, and that's one of the things that drew me to that boot camp. And I learned a lot of stuff in a pretty short amount of time, but it was like great. You know, I've been teaching college for 10 years and I didn't want to go back and get a degree. There was no way. And I needed the guidance of a boot camp because I was kind of like all over the place in my life at that time. So it worked out really well. And I feel really good coming out of there.
What was the curriculum like? Did they teach React primarily, or did they teach, I think they taught Ruby, right?
Yeah, so it's a full stack program, and the beginning is with Ruby, and then you learn Ruby, Rails, JavaScript, and React and Redux at the end there. So kind of gives you an overview of everything, and it's really thorough with Ruby and Rails, just really teaches you how to think about coding, which was super valuable when we got to the React portion.
Pretty solid setup. So had you done like tech like at all prior?
Not really. Like I was a community organizer for about a year, and then I taught for 10 years. So it was pretty much a complete transformation for me.
And then one day you were just like,
what was that moment? What was that moment where you were like, okay, this is it? Like walk us through that and like, yeah.
Yeah, sure. The moment was when I was giving birth to my fourth child. Two of my organs ruptured into each other.
Jeez.
Yeah. But they told me I was fine and they sent me home. And then like a month later, I had surgery to repair that. And then I like OD'd on morphine in the hospital and they had to give me Narcan, which was like a low point. So when I came out of that, I was a mess, right? I had a newborn and so I had like PTSD, anxiety attacks, depression, and I was kind of all over the place. And so my husband is a developer, Jesse Weigel, and he suggested I learn how to code. And I thought, like, that sounds ridiculous right now because I'm obviously a mess. I don't need one more thing on my plate. But he kept bugging me and I was like, well, whatever. If he shuts up, then I'll go ahead and do it. And so I started working on Free Code Camp, and I found that my PTSD would like take a break while I was learning how to code. So it became really therapeutic for me. And then I just kind of fell in love. So it was just this really roundabout, strange way of getting there. But it turned out to be like exactly what I needed for my life.
That's fun. That's
Makes
great.
all the
That,
sense in the world.
you know, if it helps a lot if you like it, and it seems like you like it. At least for me, right? Like I don't think I would have gone as far as I have if I didn't genuinely enjoy it, right? Because it kind of gives you like that little push to fuck with things after work or shit like that. That's great that you ended up, because I know I've had some people that I've tried to like push into development. They ended up not liking it, and they have a bad time. It's not really like their thing. It doesn't fascinate them. That's awesome.
Yeah, it would. Like I tell people a lot of times, like I think maybe if I learned how to crochet, it might have stopped the PTSD because I was just learning a new skill and my brain had to fully focus. But I'm really glad that it was coding and not crocheting.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more profitable. I mean, just ever so slightly.
Just a scooch.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. So tell us about interviewing and tell us about what you're doing now and what the process was like. You said, I think in our like pre-show stuff that you were doing some interviewing. So just tell us about where you're at.
Yeah. So when this whole pandemic thing went down, I lost my job pretty early on. And so I was really fortunate. After I graduated from boot camp, I found a job really quickly, and I was looking for something that was like part-time and flexible and remote. And I ended up working with a consultant, and it was a really great situation for a first job. There was a lot of mentorship, there was a lot of teaching and patience, and I feel like that's really what I needed coming out of that. And then when that happened, that kind of threw me for a loop because now I'm interviewing pretty much for the first time ever after doing this for 9 months, but still feeling no confidence whatsoever because I don't know how to kind of like navigate the weird way interviews are done. And so I interviewed a ton the first couple of weeks after I lost my job, and it was crazy because I like went into this one interview and they were sure that they would have the funding for it, and then they like gave me a 20-hour assignment essentially. So I went and I did that assignment.
20-hour assignment.
They had me read 2 books and learn all about like a different sector of tech that I had never worked in.
I haven't heard that shit before.
Yeah. So it was really, so I was excited about the job, and like obviously I was looking for anything at that point. So I went into that second interview, and she was like, "Hey, I want to be really transparent with you. I lost the funding just before we had this call." And I'm like, "Oh, excellent. Like, I'm so glad that like the last week I spent doing nothing but going through these books and learning about this field." But it was fine. Like I learned a lot from her in that interview, but it was just like interview after interview is like that. And, I'm interviewing for junior type roles and spending like hours on coding challenges and multiple interviews. And like, I got to one interview where I had done, I think it was my second or third interview with this company and a coding challenge, a 4-hour coding challenge. And then we got to the point where they were going to offer me the position, and they were like, "Okay, like, well, what's the salary that you're asking for?" And I told them my hourly rate, and they were like, "Oh, well, we were thinking more of $30 an hour." I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me, right?" And so then, like, after that point, I said, that's just a no-go for me. I can't do that. And then they gave me a different offer. And then later that day rescinded that offer because they said that they didn't pay their other developers that much money and they couldn't justify paying me that much. So like the whole experience of interviewing at this point was just so up and down because there was so much uncertainty. And then I really wasn't sure what I was worth at that point because, you know, I have like this woman offering me a job and then telling me that I'm overvaluing myself. And so it just was super like frustrating. And I've heard people use the word soul crushing before. And I'm like, that's kind of extreme, I think. And then I went through it and I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely soul crushing. Like, I'm not a crier, but one day I just like sat down and cried. like I can't.
Did you feel that it was, and I meant how you feel, not whether it was or wasn't. I just meant from your perspective. Did you feel that this was a symptom of Flatiron and Flatiron's preparation, or did you think it was a timing thing in the market, or did you think that it was like a personal thing, or a combination of all three? Would you just talk about that for a little bit and see and give the listeners and viewers a sense of like, was this like basically built, like, is this common, do you think, for you said the Flatiron School, or like just talk about that, like where you sort of decided that was like the cause of all this?
I mean, I think that I was pretty well prepared from Flatiron School. They have a great like career portion of their program. And almost every interview I went on, I was offered a job, and either it was rescinded or the salary, the hourly rate was too low. So I think like it's just the frustration of being a new developer and trying to figure out like, okay, what am I worth?
Right.
Is it okay for me to ask for this much? Like, and so it didn't really get better until I finally got into the mindset of I'm not just being interviewed, I'm interviewing these companies as well. And so until I could really say, like, the great thing about the job that I had before quarantine was like, I loved the person that I was working with because he was a really great mentor. And like I said, he's patient, and I was able to learn a lot from him. And so what I learned about like having a good job for me is not all about the money, although like $30 an hour is just not going to cut it. But it's about the people that you work with as well. So if I was going to change jobs, it better be for a job where I know that I would really enjoy working with those people.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like historically, like for, at least for what I've done, right? Like it's like never, ever get less than you've already gotten.
That's the trick, right? You always want to level up.
Yeah, you always want to level up. And then, as far as, there is no static worth or level. It's really what you can convince them and get them to agree to.
It's that's what price equals, right? Price equals willingness to pay.
Yeah. And, that's always balanced though. It's not, again, like you were saying, it's not money. It's not always money, right? Like I've taken less on, I want to say 1 or 2 occasions, right? Maybe where I did see the opportunity for growth, right? If it was a place where it's like, this is a place where I can truly level up hard, I've taken slightly less, just for
it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
And Ken, if I recall, Ken, you even had some situations where you weren't taking less money, but you were working less.
Yeah.
Right. Because of whatever cap structure things that were going on. But you told me once that you actually like got the same salary, but took more vacation because they wouldn't otherwise promote you or bump your salary.
Yeah. So it's all a trade-off for the different benefits.
Yeah. And the thing that coming from my perspective, Ken, what's interesting is I used to always basically check the job market. And you know this, I've discussed this with you. Every once in a while, even when I was running the agency, I would check in the job, check what I was basically worth and what I could get in the just the straight up sort of cog in the wheel developer job. And that was pretty helpful because it allowed me to assess, what the alternatives were and also what my opportunity cost was. Right. And Ken, I talked to you a little bit about that, which was like, well, I could get this if I worked at Facebook, if I worked at Google, if I worked at this, and that sort of grounded me back into reality as to where I was at, what my own worth was. And definitely helped with my sanity. Not knowing what you can make is very disturbing to your own, entire concept of yourself is very, we're back on okay. So Bekah's
Sorry,
No.
my computer just shut down. It was like, I'm done. So good luck.
That's awesome. So yeah, so I was just saying that like just knowing what you can make in the market is so helpful to your like sense of self. And I know it's crazy, like obviously it shouldn't be that you shouldn't derive your sense of self-worth from work. But it definitely helps when you're going to the grocery store and you're making a car purchase, or you're just knowing what you actually can make is huge, because you never want to live outside your means. What the baseline would be. And so I found that extremely helpful, right? Because what I was trying to do from a financial perspective was I didn't want to live outside my market rate means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what I could make in the market. Even when I was running my agency, I was like, I can live well, but I don't want to live like outside the bounds of, because agency life is agency life. Things can go well some years and not so great the next. But if I just sort of I thought that if I just stayed within like my market rate and lived that kind of lifestyle, it'd be like pretty financially sound.
If you had to fall back to what you would consider a market rate job, operating at this would be.
I wouldn't need to change my lifestyle.
Yeah.
Which was very important.
Yeah.
A nice way to take cash off the table too. But before that, or in between, sometimes I'd go nuts because I'd have no idea what to spend on something. and that I have a friend who went to Flatiron too, and he was in a situation where, and actually I got to check in on him, but my friend Tyler, and he struggled to get a job because like around January, just November, December, like November, it was still actually a pretty tough job market just coming from a boot camp. And I hope he's doing all right now.
Q4 is never hiring season.
Q4 is always hard. But what I bring up Tyler is because he has a similar situation. He's like, well, like, I don't know how much I can make. I could maybe make 50 grand at some development jobs, but there are other development jobs that are like, 6 figures off the bat. And so it definitely is one of these like kind of head scratching things.
A lot of it, it's like some of the things are like a name brand.
Of course.
So it's like a lot of folks I see like will actually take less to work at the name brand, to have the name brand on their resume, right? I'm not going to like name names, but like certain companies are, more appealing looking than others on the, like, oh yeah, like I've never really worked places where I'm going to be like X this on my Twitter bio, but like people.
But if you are,
you put it on there.
Right. If it's going to make your Wikipedia page, right, then you're willing to make some choices about yourself about that, right?
Yeah. But in the same sense, nobody knows tech co, right? A lot of the time we'll pay more because like the appealing companies will be snatching people up. So they're like, hey, we'll pay like way more. Like you're going to work on this thing that's like not as interesting or whatever, something like that, but back
office ETL co, but at back office ETL co is going to pay you double than
Italy.
Right. And maybe, and you got to manage your finances, right? Like sometimes that's okay. And you may want to do that for a year or two, or you may just got to, hit the money in the bank, right? Everybody's got different financial situation. Sometimes you just got to, put that shit away, and tell you what, 3-4 years after putting away bank, you could do whatever you want.
Yeah. Sometimes trying something different works out. Like I went into the finance thing. And it, like going in, right, I was like enormously skeptical because you come from regular tech where it's like I can walk in a tank top into the office and shit. And like now I have to go like to J. Crew and like buy like khakis and shit like that.
But you do fit surprisingly well in, I think, there.
Culturally speaking, yeah. But like
because you're very serious about what you do, right? It's the rest of your life that you're not so serious about.
That's right. But it turned out to be like wildly fascinating work. Like, you're like, oh, it's fine. It's going to be the drive. I'm like, no, it's like amazing performance challenges. So trying something different like that, it's like definitely worth a try, in my opinion.
And Bekah, you'll be back in here. Yeah. Just to get your take on this. And then also when you're looking at companies, I know you don't always have a choice, but a lot of times you do. And I wanted to ask you about like, does Flatiron prepare you for like where they think your strike zone is going to be? Or is it just like completely up to you? Is there a placement system or like a guidance counselor?
So they have career service. They have this like career track that's towards the end of your program, which is, I think it's really fantastic. But like, I kind of documented my entire journey, whether through my blog or through Twitter. So I had like a decent following at that point. And so it was actually my initial Twitter post that got me my job. And I think like networking is such a huge part of it. If people like know you and they've seen you grow and they kind of have an understanding of how you learn and how you work. then you're going to do way better than somebody who has spent like the last 4 months not doing any networking, and maybe they have a more solid portfolio than you, but like at the junior level, which is where I can speak, I think that your connections are so important to what you're doing. And also, like, I think that different considerations need to be taken for your first position versus like your mid-level or your senior position, because like, are you going to be thrown into a job and have no idea what you're doing because it's vastly different from anything you've worked on? Or will there be mentorship or some type of guidance? Or like, what is that transition into your first position going to look like? And like, for me, that was really important. So making sure that there was a good fit for me was more important than salary considerations, I guess. But, you know, at the same time, like, I got what I asked for. And so everything, I don't know, just kind of worked out in my favor. But I think like that was hugely due to networking and to just working really hard to kind of make my presence in the tech world known and to help other people along the way.
That's such a great advice. Like my friend Tyler had a similar situation where he's like, I don't know, with this job or that job. And he was actually shooting too low, in my opinion, for what he was doing. And I told him that the best thing you could do, you know, as an employment perspective, just like, do you like I guess you call it like hashtag learn in public, like Sean Wang's idea, which is that. And what I said to Tyler was like, dude, you could start, if you just make a Next.js blog, or if you make a Gatsby blog, whatever, you write about making the blog, you write about your experience, you show yourself, you start building your following. As an employer, I'm much more interested in somebody who's already shown that they have like a little following that's, you know, coming through, or they're putting in the effort where you know, we can tell if we think that this person's got the right stuff, they're approaching this stuff the right way. You show off your writing skill, your communication skills, your documentation skills, how you work. It's so much more helpful to an employer to see that than another person out of a boot camp with the same boot camp portfolio, right? And the same project moonshot that they haven't really completed, but they want to complete, which is a very common thing to see from boot camp grads. It's like, well, I want to build this nightlife app. Okay, but like, you don't know how to do that. And so like, that's awesome, but like, let's see something, you know, a little bit more down to earth. And seeing that like learn in public style growth trajectory is super important. So if you're listening to this and you're a junior, put yourself out there and learn in public. I would say that's massively important, because there's no time like the present when it comes to starting your sort of like either both networking and also community sort of growth.
Yeah, like the networking and visibility is so huge. Like huge. Especially when job hunting, right? You can lean on that network, and you know, perhaps people have seen you talk. You spoke at Mid-Atlantic, right?
Yeah, I did.
How'd that go?
It was interesting. Like I taught for 10 years. And so it was more challenging than I thought it would be, just because I don't know, like when you're teaching, you kind of have expertise over something. And then I was going into this new field and like got in front of a bunch of people and suddenly was like, I know nothing. So I was super nervous, but I think that it went really well. I'd love to be able to keep doing it. I've been holding these virtual coffees with devs twice a week, and it's been a lot of fun just to like meet new people and to hear new ideas. And the mentorship that's going on at those things is pretty amazing, because we have devs of all part of their journey, whether they're just starting or interested, to people who have been doing it 15 years. So to be able to have like that experience where I can see people that are learning and growing and getting help, that like, I don't know, I'm a mom of 4 kids who are 10 and under, like going to a meetup an hour away, that's just a no-go for me. I can't do that.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
It's like great to be able to have this online community right now, and to be able to network with people and learn so much from people. Like I think we had people from 5 different countries today.
That's awesome.
And that's like, I'm from small town Ohio. For me, that's just a really big thing.
So we got a question in the chat. In your opinions, is it worth dealing with a quote taskmaster leadership, or leadership that ignores quality for a higher salary? Is that part of quote paying your dues? So Ken, I'll ask you. We'll go to you first.
I mean, I don't know. That I think that comes down to like your personal values, right? Like, and also the importance that you're placing on that higher salary, right? So like if you need a higher salary to pay for a certain thing, the family or house or something like that, and you don't give as much of a shit, sure, yeah, it's worth it. If you're bootstrapped, so to say, kind of low on expenses, and you don't feel like dealing with that shit, then I guess don't, right?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your financial situation and sort of where you want to go. At a certain point, after maybe you've proven to yourself that you can get a job, or you just think you have the confidence to know that you could get a job, you can make some decisions about your life depending on your financial situation, right? So if you need to make some cash, you'll optimize for cash. Sometimes you want to optimize for equity, right? Sometimes you want to optimize for people, right? And you're constantly going to play this game. But at a certain point, maybe like, I don't know, for me at least, I got to a point where I'm at right now, where it's like I have this opportunity cost of working for straight cash instead of working on my own thing, and I'm cool with that, right? And you got to play that, that's a lifestyle choice, because at a certain point, well, I can always go get that job, right? And maybe that's a really cocky thing to say, but for Ken, like, you could always go work at X, and X is somewhere that's some sort of lifestyle thing, or that you may or may not be willing to yourself, but that becomes like a baseline, and then it's just like, how much bullshit do you want to tolerate, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the times it's not a either or, right? Sometimes you get your cake and eat it too. But if you're in a position, right, where you might disagree with the management or what have you, and money's important to you, and that's what's keeping you there, then
you've made your choices.
I can't hate you for it.
There's absolutely
for
nothing
me,
wrong.
Stability, right?
Right.
Right now, like it would be like with so many people getting fired right now, right? Like right now, I feel like it would be like a bad time to quit, right?
Oh yeah.
So like, even if you had a problem there, like you might hang in there. It might not just be the salary; it might just be stability in general. Like I'm now that I have like kids and a wife and shit, and
you got responsibilities,
house,
you got dependents.
I'm like way more risk averse.
Dude, I just moved out, but in contrast, I just moved out of my apartment in Manhattan. I have no rent.
Yeah, you live expenses. In Vermont, man.
I live in Vermont with
maple syrup and cheddar cheese.
Yeah, but like my expense that I'm considering right now is going to be a car lease, and that's going to be my only rent expense. So like, I literally have like zero burn rate, right? So different responsibilities, different situations. The goal is to figure out what you want to do, what you're willing to do, and figure out that balance, and what you can do, right?
Yeah. Circling back to the talk thing, Bekah, I'm curious. You were an English professor. Do you think that helped you when you were giving the talk? Like for me, like no matter what, I'm always scared shitless when I'm speaking. I've been afraid of public speaking, and I've only recently got comfortable with it. Having done that, right, as a professor, was that easy for you, the actual getting up and talking?
I think it worked against me, honestly, because I was used to being really comfortable in a classroom of students, right? But they're not my peers. And so now, like, I've been developing for under a year. Actually, at that point, I like had a job for a month, right? And so I felt like I am nowhere near qualified to be talking about anything, but this is cool. So I think that I just like hyped up my nerves really badly when I got into that room and just saw people, and they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for so many years. I'm like, oh, awesome. Like, I've got nothing to say to you, which I think is not true in retrospect. It was just those nerves of like, I'm not the expert in the room anymore. And like, that's been a big part of the learning. Yeah, it's been a huge part of the learning process for me. Like even with communication for those people I'm working with, like I'm used to being in a position where I don't have anyone to talk to. Like for 10 years in that job, like I didn't have anybody to ask questions to. I didn't report to anybody. Like I just did my thing and then I left. And like now have to communicate with people all the time. And so it's a totally different thing. I'm not the person that knows all of the things anymore. I'm the person that needs to be asking the questions, right? And so it was just a little bit of a navigation on like, okay, so where am I in this community and how do I fit in? And is this okay? And so I think like hopefully I'll be able to give a talk again sometime in the future. And I know then like I've gotten rid of those nerves and I feel okay talking about things. But for that first one, I think that it actually worked to my detriment.
Yeah. I think we all remember our first talks. Interesting though, about the background as an English teacher. I read this thing, Ken, that math is not the best determinant of programming skill, but affinity, or not affinities, but just mastering of language actually is a better predictor of like programming prowess, which I find interesting.
Syntax related?
Yeah, because if you think about like when you're writing, the theory, I could send you the paper. It's like their hypothesis was that because writing is fundamentally like a system of various constructs and rules, it's much more similar from a expression, like freedom to express yourself. And so they went into like the biological, like it's the cortex or the thing, and people's, whatever, I don't fucking know. But
that's fascinating.
They found that people who had like knew multiple languages and also just had better mastery of languages and higher, like, I think it was like SAT math, English, like reading comprehension scores and writing scores were like doing, I don't know, better, or had higher salaries or programming salaries and shit like that. So it's really interesting that you're an English teacher because I'm sure you write awesome docs, right? Like, I'm not kidding. Like, you probably write awesome documentation, which is the name of the game nowadays, now that we're not in the office together with everyone. Do you find that you like, did you find the math hard? What was your math background? And like, talk to me about like what it's like transferring from, English papers to React.
So when I went to school for undergrad, I was originally going to be a math major, but they didn't offer Calc 2 first semester. So I took an English class instead. And so that's how I ended up as an English major. So I really enjoy math. But I think in that, like, logic is a huge part of what you're doing, right? And so when I was teaching rhetoric, like, I could see the same techniques that were being used in learning how to write code. Or like if you're writing poetry, like, I don't know, a function is like a little poem, right? And it goes towards this anthology of everything that you're writing and how it works together. So I think like language patterns are very similar to code, and you're just learning different genres of writing, right? So whether you're writing, like, I don't know, I used to write screenplays with my brother, like that's a totally different form of writing, in the same way that like even using a different framework is kind of like a different source of writing. And so I think that, coupled with, like, I have a master's in English, which was research heavy, theory based, which is the same thing essentially as digging into docs, right? Especially if you have crappy docs that you're looking at and you're trying to decipher what they're doing. Like, that's the entire thing that I did for 2 years in grad school, is like figuring out what the meaning is behind these texts and learning how to apply that to different things. And that's what you're doing when you're coding too. So I definitely think that having an English background is really practical for learning how to code, because you're looking at language in a different way and you've learned how to do that.
It's such, Ken, it's like parallel for you and music. It's like same, right? Like, music is a system of, and language itself. And it seems like it's so obvious when you talk about it like that. But that was the most eloquent, way more eloquent way of describing what the comparison that I was going for.
I don't think it ever gets a hold of my Medium posts. It's gonna be like, what the fuck is this?
right, exactly. But no, that's so interesting. It makes all the sense in the world when you hear it, but I don't think it's as obvious to people. I think a lot of people think that coding is super mathy. It's like you just need multiplication.
It's so not mathy unless you're like
at all
animating some shit like very specially or something. I don't know. Like,
unless you're building a Spring library, there's not a lot of math.
Not super mathy.
But people think it's like this hardcore math thing, right? Like, it's
like, oh, you fucking like PhD in math. I'm like, nah.
But it's so cool. It's just awesome. I also think that developers who make the jump and do change careers, if they're able to somehow leverage their prior experience for something like English or music, have like superpowers, because they're able to, whether it's writing documentation or expressing themselves or comments or other things like that. There's so much versus a CS major. And I'm generalizing. I feel like they're sometimes able to take advantage of those idiosyncrasies, and they always come out in interesting ways. So for Ken, it's like the music comes through, right, all the time.
For me, it's like, if you have a thing. So like, if you're a programmer, right, and the shit that excites you is programming, a lot of the time you'll write dev tools, right? Because when it comes time to build something, right, what you're going to build to help you, the shit that you like, is going to be dev tools, right? Whereas like if you were like a chef, right, suddenly it's like you have this new power, right, of coding and building these things. Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I'm going to make a fucking recipe book. And me, I'm like, I'm going to make a drum machine. You know what I mean? Like, it's really cool when you can take some adjacent interest and
cross the domain,
fucking supercharge that shit with programming. It's exciting.
I do agree with the developer tools thing. It's like, that's what happens when your hobby becomes your obsession and you just love programming, which is totally cool, but it's also cool to like.
I did a lot of, but yeah. I have a friend who made a shit ton of money, and he made like dentist office management software or some shit.
Look, and the way to really make cash is to apply it.
How do you even know to do that? Like,
yeah, but like if you're able to like cross the domain, if you can take what you've learned from a developer, like as a developer, and apply it to a different domain where it's only you can see that, right? That's what makes you unique, is that you have the ability to see that crossover. And there's tends to be money to be made because you'll be able to identify the neglected parts of, that ecosystem. Like, dude, the skiing technology is fucking terrible. All the ski tech is fucking terrible. My dude. But like, also the market is tiny, so it's not that great. I think my favorite one is have you heard the story about the Spanish Bible app on iOS?
Yeah, didn't that shit make like fucking millions of dollars?
It's the best story ever. It's on Hacker News. So this guy spoke Spanish, identified that there was like this is way back in the OG app. This is like probably 10 years ago. Identified that there was no good Spanish Bible app in the App Store, and he built it. And what's great about the Bible is it doesn't really change that much. So he literally like built this app, and like, there's no V2 of this thing, right? So he built this app, and he like really tweaked it out, but then he stopped working on it, and it was basically like, quote, perfect, and he didn't update it, and it was just minting money. It just mint money. And then finally he sold it to some like Christian technology company that buys all this stuff and rolls it up. But I think he was like making like $80,000-$90,000 a year on the side, maybe more than that, and he hadn't updated it in like 2 or 3 years.
I wish I wrote the fucking Spanish Bible. Wish I had the foresight to identify that need,
Right. That's what the actual, right. That's where that is. But that was just an example of like, it's fun where that shit where that stuff can go.
Yeah. I read this article about this grandma. She's like 84 or something, and she's developing apps now. And I think that's fantastic because like, who knows what 84-year-olds need in apps except like 84-year-old grandma. Like, nobody else is like 100%. Looking at that market. And so like, I don't know. I'm kind of slowly working on this app for postpartum wellness that tracks like mental health and things like that, just because there was nothing else out there. It was like, oh, postpartum, like, want to lose weight? Like, well, there's a lot more to it than that. And like, I think that, when we bring diversity into the industry, that really helps us to like expand what's going out there and to see the need for things that aren't going on. Like, I don't know, my grandfather's 96 and he uses Facebook or whatever, but like, what does he need? I mean, I guess the market for 96-year-old men it's pretty small, but like still,
no.
The point is, when you are part of the group that isn't represented, what you need, right?
Yeah,
totally. My sister I have 2 nieces, and they're 8 and 12, and they're cooped up in the house. And so we built this thing, Parent List, which was just a list of resources for kids and adults to do like together by grade level. And it's just a directory of online resources.
Nice.
Because my sister's like, all my friends don't have time for this. Like, no one has time to go search, like find and filter through all this stuff. And so she just started collecting it all. But it's like that kind of thing where if you that bridge is where there's so much like opportunity.
You gotta have the problem to know the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Speaking of children,
yeah.
How's lockdown going on your side? Okay.
It's been interesting. Like I said, I've got 4 kids. I've got like 10 and a half, 8 and a half, 5 and a half, and 3 and a half. And so it has been challenging. We've definitely all grown a lot. Like, I lost my job on the very day that they came home and were done with school. So it's just like this process of like so much being thrown at me at once. And so it took a while to just like kind of get things in hand. The older two are easier because they finally were like, okay, we're not going back to school. We're going to do our work and be done with it. And then like I had homeschooled the first two for a while. And when I decided to not homeschool them anymore, I was super excited to never have to teach a kid how to read again. And then I was like teaching my 5.5-year-old how to read again. So he's done. Well, they don't have any more assignments they have to turn in. So we're done. We are
Nice.
we're not doing that anymore. But yeah, so it's been, and now like I've gotten work back. It's trying to figure out how to work with kids at home. So it's good times.
Yeah. It's a hoot.
All right, so we got a question from chat. Martha Sharp says, I'm homeschooling mom of 4 under 8, been teaching myself coding since last year. Did you ever consider freelancing, or did you go straight to a full-time job?
Oh no, I did not. I've never had a full-time job. So I enjoy freelancing. I needed something that was flexible. For me, like I'm still the primary parent in the household. And so like I've got a kid to take to preschool and, you know, zoo field trips and doctor's appointments and all that. Like that's what I do. So like I'll wake up at 4:30 in the morning and I'll work for a couple of hours before school. And then I take them to school and then I do my thing. And so like freelancing has been the best for me. I've really, really loved it. And that's what I'm doing now. So now I have, like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, I was working 5 hours a week, and now I've got a lot of work on my plate, more than I've ever had. So it's just interesting how things grow and change, but I've really loved the flexibility of being able to, 1, learn on a job, 2, being able to figure out my own schedule, and 3, being able to pick my own projects.
Awesome. I want to ask another question that we've brought up on the podcast before. I think it was actually maybe on the first or second podcast with Sunil, who's going to be on, I think, next week. We talked about the hump, right? The first hump and getting over it, which is that getting past the stage of like code, what is it? Code Academy, like where you doing stuff in the browser to actually like building something. So Bekah, tell us about like how you got over that hump, if you even experienced it, and like what it was like from both, if you can remember, like what it was like to be on the other side of it.
Yeah. So like from tutorial hell into like building, kind of like that.
And so like now I'm rocking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that takes I don't know. It takes a long time depending on your personality. Like for me, I didn't have a high amount of confidence in my abilities to do anything. So that was super challenging. And I've talked to a lot of boot camp grads that feel like they don't have that confidence until they're like 6 months to 1 year post graduation of boot camp. And I think like that seems pretty accurate for me. So like when I went into my first job, I was super overwhelmed by moving from a very small code base of projects that I was building. And like those projects were passion projects for me, right? Like I'm building a mental health web app for Flatiron School, which was great. Like I wanted to do that, and it was interesting, and it was meaningful to me. And then diving into this huge code base of things that I had never seen or touched before. And so for me, that was like kind of that bigger challenge. And it's not me building something personally, kind of like what you're talking about, but I feel like it's that hump moment of, do I belong here? Can I do this? Like, what's the journey? And I feel like, so my background is in English, and there's this, the hero's journey is a big part of like understanding this. Yeah. And so there's this point like where the hero is presented with this journey, right? And like he has a choice, or he or she has a choice to accept the journey or to just stop and go back to normal, regular life. And I think that for me, that's that moment of like accepting, like, I can do this and I will do this. And I might do a really crappy job and I might have a lot of setbacks, but once you push forward through those things, you finally realize that, okay, like everybody, first of all, everybody fails. Second of all, everybody has questions and is looking shit up. Like it is just accepting the fact that you will never know everything as a developer, no matter what point you are. And so I would say like that's only come to me within like maybe the last month or two, but especially after I lost my job, I kind of like had that dark night of the soul moment where I'm like, I don't know, like I'm dying here. And I realized, like, you know what? I did that and I was okay at that. And I started a React Native project with this startup. And I thought, like, I can't do that. I don't know React Native. And I was like, hey, like I can do that. And then that was the moment really that I thought, like, okay, I really have grown. I have the ability to do things on my own, and I can figure things out in ways that I don't feel like I need that mentorship as much as I did in the beginning.
Do you think
a little more self-learning? Okay,
follow-up question. I know we're talking on time. Do you think, as an educator, you may have an interesting perspective on this, that the American education system conditions people to fail at this kind of stuff because, you know, how it works with testing or grades and stuff like that, where as your developer, you're not graded, you just have to get it done. And so your comfort zone effectively becomes not knowing shit. But that's like actually you actually have a negative feedback loop in most American education, where you don't know something on the test, you get a bad grade, your parents yell at you, right? And so what I was hearing from you was, it sounded like you were actually like almost scared and I felt this way, at least. I was scared to like mess up my computer. It was my only computer. Right. I was terrified. I was like entering the stuff in the command line. Like, this is some matrix bullshit. Like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And also, like, this is my only computer. I can't fuck this up. Right. And now I'm excited to see, like, GitHub Code Spaces last week was announced, and Code Sandbox, where you can like fuck up other things. Right. But I was terrified. I was also scared of JavaScript for a while. HTML, CSS never scared me. JavaScript scared me. It was just like very intimidating.
It was intimidating for me too at first.
It is scary. I don't know. There's a lot of shit going on. Everybody does it differently. Like, I don't know. I don't want to mess things up. And I think maybe it has to do with, like, the browser is actually pretty forgiving if you have invalid HTML, but like JavaScript is not forgiving. If invalid JavaScript.
At least back then, right? Like, you do like HTML, CSS, and you make the website. Like JavaScript, like, at least back then, right? It was like, this is like programming. This is like fucking real deal. But, you know, I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, it was very apprehensive for me, because it was like, oh, well, I'm gonna have to get into that shit. Like,
which brings me to the next point, which is that, like, we need to be making tools that account for this emotional experience. And like, some of them are there now, but like, this is where like having badass error messages can go so far, right? In your library or tool. Like, yeah, you're doing a minimalist thing. Well, it's like, does it have great error messages? If it doesn't, then you're not helping people who are new. And I feel like we could do a lot more in the community to make onboarding and learning, like, or just make the
even now when I work in other languages, I'll see an error, I'll be like, what the fuck does this mean?
Yeah. And it's so intimidating, right? Because you don't know if you broke your machine, or if you broke, and when you're starting out, you have no idea. Right?
Like, oh yeah, just download, just brew install this fucking thing, and point the arch flags, and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking
about?
Edit
your path. Like, dude, I remember being terrified of dot files. Terrified.
Editing your path.
I remember like having to use sudo in my terminal, and I'm like, this is a bad idea. Like, this is going to do something really bad. And it's the thing, like, I think that having somebody who's new to learning, writing tutorials or helping you write tutorials or proofing tutorials is a huge way to figure out how to present this to people in ways that are meaningful to them. Because let's face it, like, when you are new, foobar means nothing to you, right? That's not meaningful. And like, I understand abstraction and thought like that, but when you're new and you don't know what a reserved word is, you're just like, I don't know what is going on with that. So like, figure out ways to talk to people and in ways that are meaningful to them, and then go on from there. And that starts with asking people what works for them, not just jumping into it without any feedback from the community.
Absolutely. Such good points. Sorry, I want to be respectful of Ken's time. And I think our lunch break's coming to an end. Ken, thanks again for making the time today. Bekah, absolutely wonderful to have you on. Let's wrap this podcast up. Absolute pleasure. So interesting. And let's wrap this up with some picks. So every week we pick our favorite things, shout outs, whatever. We'll go with Kenneth. Do you have a pick of the week?
Yeah, I got a pick.
Yeah.
All right, so this is gonna sound so fucking silly, all right, but so I'm going there. So my pool was fucked up. It was turning green and shit, and I was like, what the fuck? So I go and I was like looking up like how to make your pool not fucking green, and then like as you do, you start getting targeted ads. Right? They're like, this man is a pool owner, so let's send some shit his way. So on Instagram, I get this like fucking thing, right? It's like it's an ad for this thing called the Skimmer Round, right? And it's a skimmer that goes in. It's a basket that goes into your skimmer, right? That apparently like turbocharges the skimmer, right? It's just like the whole fucking thing. It's just like it's like crazy, right? So like I see it and I'm like, well, there's a lot of bullshit in my pool right now. That thing does look fucking sick. So, against better judgment, I've been burned on Instagram things before, but I went and ordered these things and they came today and I went and put them in and it's magical to watch. You put it in there and this fucking thing is just turning that shit over. It's like, so yeah, if you have a bunch of leaves and shit in your pool and you're lazy fuck like me and you don't want to go skim them out, you can throw this shit in there and that fucking thing is like,
or you want to do weird shit in a bathtub. Either way.
That's right. It's rowdy. Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Your phone will probably hear me say this and then it's going to show up in your Instagram feed. So when it does, just watch the video because this shit is crazy.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. That's awesome. My pick for the week is U-Haul.
U-Haul.
Yeah. So most people know this. So I actually ended things with my girlfriend during quarantine. Not for the show, different show. But I drove to and from Vermont and moved out of Manhattan. And me being, this like privileged Jewish kid from New York, like I never driven a U-Haul truck. Like, no, like absolutely not. Like, not a thing I did. But because of fucking COVID, like I'm not hiring a moving company and like not doing that. That's ridiculous. So I actually like rented a U-Haul truck, and then I drove that. And first of all, I packed it all up with like the blankets and everything, all of my shit. And I drove it like basically 4 or 5 hours. And I got like one of the Sprinter vans, so it wasn't like a truck. So, but it was like massive Sprinter van, like the 16 or 18 foot like thing.
You get used to that bad boy.
No, so like I put on my Pit Vipers and like it's a truck because it has no rear view mirror. Right, that's when you're actually driving a truck. So if you've never driven, if you're you're only driving a truck if it doesn't have a rear view mirror. And I did this shit.
Vipers? Did you get a Wawa coffee?
Yeah, dude, I had Pit Vipers. I stopped at Stewart's and Cumberland Farms. I used diesel. I did diesel for the first time. And like, dude, there was no audio. There was no audio jack, so I was just listening to the fucking like the radio, like tuning shit.
AM radio.
So yeah, just like I don't know. Just imagine this like super white Jewish trucker who's just like going on that, just like pulling up next to you, like what's up in Pit Vipers. I don't know. Nodding. It was a funny image. I don't know. It was this fucking weird ass cutscene.
It sounds incredible.
it was phenomenal. I put on the Pit Vipes and it also care of itself. But actually, those things are pretty fun to drive.
Marlboro Reds with work boots and shit.
Anyways, I thought you get a kick out of that. It was fucking hilarious.
Beck, do you have a pick?
I've got 2 picks. So they're both workout related. So when I work out, I like to listen to true crime podcasts because nothing gets blood moving like murder. So any true crime podcast from Wondery, I have listened to almost all of them. So that's one. And the second is my husband put up a squat rack this week, and it has been super nice to be able to lift some heavy weights again.
I saw you.
That's very cool.
Squatting heavy.
It wasn't, it's not as heavy as I was squatting 2 months ago. So I feel like a little embarrassed about it. But
you said you were squatting above 35 though, right?
Yeah, which is good.
That's pretty good. If you look back there, you see the blue?
That's a squat rack.
That's the rack.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I have to walk through there like a hall of shame.
So that's so smart from a psychological perspective to put it right between you and your office.
Yeah, it completely impedes my door, so I have to consciously step over it and feel shame every time I don't bang a few out.
That's hilarious, but also a great hack. I'm working on getting into prison shape. I mean, by prison shape, I mean maybe prison shape is not the word now. Zombie shape. I don't know. Apocalypse shape.
Calisthenics.
Well, no. I mean, although my sister-in-law got a Peloton, I got to get the shoes. I really don't like spinning though. It's like not.
No,
It
you will though.
It hurts
You
my
will
ass.
though. If you try
Hurts
it,
my
you'll
ass.
be like, "This is sick."
Okay. Well,
It's
anyways,
gonna
we're doing
continue to hurt
yoga,
your
some just weightlifting. It's great.
Need a
but
kettlebell? Do you have a kettlebell?
Kettlebell. Yeah,
Kettlebells.
we've got kettlebells.
All about kettlebells.
Done a lot of that this quarantine.
Yeah. Anyways, well, thanks for coming coming on. It was really awesome to talk and meet you.
Where
Yeah,
can
thanks so
folks
much
find
for
you on the
having me.
internet?
Yeah, where can people find you?
I am a prolific tweeter, so you can get me on Twitter at Bekah HW. It's BEKAH, and then another H and W, and I'm on Instagram too. And I've got a blog. It's linked somewhere on there, but I'm also on dev.to, so you can find me there too.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, thanks. And this has been another episode of the Undefined podcast. You can check out all of our episodes at undefined.fm or follow us on Twitter at theundefined.io. And yeah, motherfuckers, we will see you all next week. Same time, same place, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Holla.
Cool.
Still live?